Imagine a world where your government considers you an enemy for speaking your mind, where FBI agents are hiding behind every corner, watching your every move. This isn't the plot of a nightmarish novel. This was America under COINTELPRO. But what exactly was COINTELPRO? Well, it was a secret program run by the FBI designed to surveil, infiltrate, and destroy any group the government deemed a threat. Civil rights activists, anti-war protesters, actors, even Albert Einstein, no one was safe. Now, to start this story, I have to take you back to March 8th, 1971. The world's eyes are fixated on the fight of the century, Muhammad Ali versus smoking Joe Frazier. I mean, this fight was so intense, it had so much energy and excitement that during the brawl, one man in the sellout crowd of 20,455 died of a heart attack. But while millions tuned in to watch two titans clash in the ring, a group of ordinary citizens are about to land the biggest punch of all against the FBI itself. Now meet our unlikely heroes, John and Bonnie Raines, a college professor and a daycare director with 3 young kids. Keith Forsyth, a cab driver with a talent for lockpicking, and William Davidon, a physics professor with a plan so audacious it just might work. They called themselves the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI. These aren't hardened criminals. They're teachers, parents, activists, and tonight they're going to attempt the impossible, breaking into an FBI office and exposing the truth about COINTELPRO. As John and Bonnie tuck their children into bed, do they know they might not ever see them again? As Keith practices picking locks one last time, does he realize he's about to change history? The burglars approach the FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania. Keith reaches for the lock and suddenly panic. The lock has been changed, but they have a crowbar. With sweaty palms and racing hearts, they make a split-second decision to force their way in. There's no turning back now. Inside, they find a treasure trove of over 1,000 classified documents. And what they found could make your blood run cold. One document signed by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover himself lays out COINTELPRO's chilling objectives: to destroy activist groups. It says, quote, "Show them as scurrilous and depraved. Call attention to their habits and living conditions. Explore every possible embarrassment. Send in women and sex. Break up marriages. Have members arrested on marijuana charges. Investigate personal conflicts or animosities between them. Send articles to the newspapers showing their depravity. Use narcotics and free sex to entrap. Use misinformation to confuse and disrupt. Get records of their bank accounts. Obtain specimens of handwriting. Provoke target groups into rivalries that may result in death." Imagine the group later as they sift through these papers, the weight of their discovery settling on their shoulders like a physical burden. What if they were caught? What would happen to their families? But more importantly, what would happen if they didn't act? The burglars realize they've stumbled on something far bigger and far more sinister than they'd ever imagined. But with this knowledge comes danger. Will they be able to expose the truth, or will the FBI's vast resources track them down first? The scope of COINTELPRO was staggering, and at its helm was J. Edgar Hoover, a man whose paranoia and racism shaped the FBI for nearly half a century. You see, Hoover saw threats everywhere in the civil rights movement and anti-war protesters, even in Hollywood. His obsession with maintaining what he saw as the American way of life led him to abuse the power of his office in ways that would shock the nation. Ironically, the very agency tasked with protecting civil rights and upholding the Constitution was actively working to undermine both. The FBI, which claims to protect American citizens from threats both foreign and domestic, had become the threat. Instead of combating public corruption, it was the corruption. Rather than protecting civil rights, it was systemically violating them. As dawn breaks, our burglars return to their normal lives, carrying a secret that could destroy them. For days, they hold their breath, waiting for the hammer to fall, but it doesn't. The FBI, the nation's top law enforcement agency, has been outsmarted by a group of amateurs. But exposing the truth proves challenging. Most journalists, fearing retaliation, return the documents to the FBI. Is this where our story ends? Not quite. Enter Betty Metzger of the Washington Post, a reporter brave enough to print what others won't. Later, she said, quote, "When you talk to people outside the movement about what the FBI was doing, Nobody wanted to believe it. There was only one way to convince people that it was true, and that was to get it in their handwriting, unquote. As Metzger's articles hit newsstands, the nation reels. The FBI's dirty laundry is aired for all to see, but the real shock comes as the full scope of COINTELPRO emerges. The FBI's operations against the Black Panther Party were particularly insidious, with three primary objectives that went far beyond just surveillance. First, they sought to discredit radical leaders within their own communities, spreading false rumors that these leaders were collaborating with law enforcement or acting as informants. This tactic was designed to erode trust and fracture these organizations from within. Second, COINTELPRO aimed to create rifts between different activist groups that shared similar values. By sowing discord between more radical and more moderate civil rights organizations or between Black and Latinx activist groups, the FBI hoped to prevent effective cooperation and coalition building. The third and most far-reaching goal was to shape public perception, particularly among white Americans. COINTELPRO worked tirelessly to portray the Black Panthers and by extension, the entire civil rights movement as a violent, disruptive force that required constant police intervention. And the FBI was willing to kill and assassinate. We can never forget Fred Hampton, the charismatic 21-year-old leader of the Illinois Black Panthers. COINTELPRO didn't just surveil him, they orchestrated his murder. Drugged by an FBI informant, Hampton was asleep when police fired 99 shots into his apartment. Hoover's tactics weren't limited to violence. He weaponized information using the FBI's resources to blackmail and intimidate. He kept secret files on politicians, celebrities, and activists using their personal lives as leverage. Hoover's FBI wasn't just enforcing the law, it was playing judge, jury, and executioner in the court of public opinion. The FBI's infamous suicide letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stands as another chilling testament to COINTELPRO's ruthlessness, saying, quote, "King, there's only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You are done. There's but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation," unquote. This letter is menacing, and Dr. King, with his unwavering spirit, defied this vicious intimidation, but not everyone could withstand such relentless pressure. Consider the case of Jean Seberg, a promising young actress. Her crime? Being a white woman in support of the Black Panther Party. COINTELPRO's response? A vicious smear campaign, including planting false stories that her pregnancy was the result of her relationship with a Black Panther. The stress led to a premature birth and her baby died just 2 days after. Her career crumbled. Devastated, she attempted suicide every year on the anniversary of her child's death, eventually succeeding in 1979. There was a note found on her addressed to her son that simply said, "Forgive me. I can no longer live with my nerves." How many more stories like hers remain untold? MLK's suicide letter and Seberg's tragedy were not isolated incidents. In fact, the FBI had what some agents darkly referred to as a suicide squad, a group dedicated to pushing activists to the brink of despair. Their tactics ranged from blackmail to psychological torture, all designed to break the spirit of those they deemed as threats. The FBI's tactics weren't limited to targeting individuals. They also aimed to manipulate public opinion on a mass scale. One of their most bizarre and chilling strategies, well, that was weaponizing children's literature. Imagine being a child flipping through a coloring book, and instead of finding friendly animals or cartoon characters, you see images of violence against police officers by Black people, the Black Panthers in particular. And this isn't just some dark corner of the internet. This was an actual coloring book created by the FBI in 1968 and passed out to white people. The pages filled with drawings of Black people attacking police, attacking white people, accompanied by captions promoting violence. Government even exploited children in their mission to discredit activist groups. COINTELPRO's reach extended so far to so many groups. Another often overlooked target was the American Indian Movement, also called AIM. In 1973, AIM members and the local Oglala Lakota occupied the town of Wounded Knee, South Dakota, protesting broken treaties and corrupt tribal leadership. What followed was a 71-day siege that saw the FBI deploy military-grade weapons, including armored personnel carriers. But the real battle was happening behind the scenes. COINTELPRO operatives infiltrated AIM, spread disinformation, and even attempted assassinations. After Wounded Knee, there was a wave of suspicious deaths on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, with many AIM supporters dying under mysterious circumstances. As the public continues to learn more about COINTELPRO operations, the question arises, how deep does this go? But here's a curveball. While COINTELPRO is notorious for targeting groups like the Black Panthers, communist groups, feminist groups, Hispanics, and anti-war activists, and those on the left, believe it or not, the FBI actually turned its dirty tricks playbook against the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, you heard that right. The same J. Edgar Hoover, who was famous for his racism, actually sicked his agents on white supremacists who were causing a lot of problems with their violence. But here's where it gets even crazier. The FBI didn't just use run-of-the-mill informants. They recruited a convicted violent criminal to infiltrate the Klan. This wasn't your average undercover work. This guy took the phrase "by any means necessary" to a whole new level. Picture this: our criminal turned informant actually kidnaps a suspected Klan leader. He ties the guy up, drags him to some lonely farm in the middle of nowhere, and interrogates him at gunpoint about the murder of civil rights leader Medgar Evers. It's like something out of a movie, right? But this was real life, orchestrated by the highest levels of American law enforcement. Now, this wild story doesn't erase COINTELPRO's many abuses. It doesn't make Hoover any less of a problematic figure, but it does show that history isn't always black and white. And while it might be tempting to cheer the FBI's aggressive tactics against a group as hated as the Ku Klux Klan, we must pause and ask ourselves some hard questions. Are we comfortable with law enforcement agencies using extrajudicial methods, even against those we consider despicable? If we condone kidnapping and threats of violence when used against the bad guys, where do we draw the line? Are we not opening the door for their use against any group deemed a threat by those in power? Because today it might be white supremacists, but tomorrow it could be environmental activists, religious minorities, or political dissidents. The slippery slope is real and it's steep. As the truth continues to come out about COINTELPRO, Congress steps in. They call for hearings. They demand answers. And the mighty J. Edgar Hoover, for the first time in his long reign, finds himself on the defensive. But even as reforms are promised, the chilling truth emerges. The damage has already been done. Movements had been destroyed, and the seeds of distrust sown by COINTELPRO have grown into a forest of conspiracy theories and anti-government attitudes that we're still navigating today. How many activists were left to die in prison or deteriorate as elders, while not one government official served a day in prison for COINTELPRO's crimes? As we peel back the layers of this dark chapter in U.S. history, we have to ask ourselves, how thin is the line between national security and tyranny? When does protection become oppression? The echoes of COINTELPRO are heard across time, touching our lives in ways we don't even realize sometimes. Fast forward to the present as you scroll through your social media feed and consider, are we living in a new era of COINTELPRO, with digital surveillance, facial recognition, and data mining? Has the government's power to monitor and disrupt grown even stronger? How has COINTEL morphed into anti-protest legislation, new targets jeopardizing the constitutional rights, free speech, and protest of American citizens? Think about recent protests and social movements. Are they being watched, infiltrated, disrupted? The methods have changed, but the questions remain the same. And what about our burglars? For 40 years, they lived with their secret always looking over their shoulders. It wasn't until 2014 that some finally stepped forward. John Raines, reflecting on their actions, spoke to the systemic nature of the injustice when he said, quote, "It looks like we're terribly reckless people, but there was absolutely no one in Washington, senators, congressmen, even the president, who dared to hold J. Edgar Hoover to accountability. It became pretty obvious to us that if we don't do it, nobody will." So as we close this chapter of American history, ask yourself, who are today's burglars in an age of whistleblowers and leaks? Who's risking everything to expose the truth? The next time you hear about government overreach or see injustice in your community, remember the media burglars. Remember that ordinary citizens, teachers, parents, and cab drivers can change the course of history. The fight that began that night in 1971 isn't over. So let me leave you with yet another question. If you discovered a modern day COINTELPRO, what would you do? How far would you go to expose the truth? And are you prepared for the consequences of your choice? Because in the end, the future of our democracy may well rest on the answers to these questions.